Hey, welcome to another short clip episode of Survival Mode. Thank you for joining. And I titled this one Seven Pillars of Optimal Health. And if you know and you kind of follow me on social media, I do listen to a lot of podcasts, some very, very kind of popular. And when I start to listen to various podcasters and I see certain themes, pretty similar guests, and all of that, I really start to pay attention. And I actually was listening to an amazing one, and it was just really, really informative. And it's the stuff that I've been studying for a while. You may know that, I'm a health and wellness coach. I've had my own experience with brain tumor and survival, hence naming that this survival mode. But I think the biggest thing that I learned was really the mindset, the stress, and all of the things that got me really reflecting back. The brain tumor I view as a gift. I know it's kind of odd, but it's a gift to kind of make me focus on really some of the things that were important in life, and relationships with other people, mindset, stress, all of those things. One of the things I took pride upon with myself was my food and how I ate and my physical activity. But there's so much more research. There's so much more coming out in so many different areas. And I titled this The Seven Pillars of Optimal Health. And I'm going to go through them. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was food. Food is really foundational. I think that's a foundational aspect of our health. And I think, I heard a stat that 80% of Americans are overweight or obese. And I was like dumbfounded by that stat that I heard. I don't know how accurate it is. I didn't research it, but I did from an expert that I was listening to. They did make that quote, and I was like, oh my God. And if you walk around, you go to the beach, you go to different areas, you may see, that, even being a little overweight is considered, overweight. And then there's that transition over to obesity. But I think one of the challenges is basically how readily food's available, how easy it is to get something quick. And I'm not going to do a whole video here today on diet. But one of the things too is really things that start to spike your glucose and insulin levels in your body are things that cause challenges: insulin resistance, inflammation, chronic inflammation in your body. And so one of the things I kind of say, stay away from the white stuff, sugar, carbohydrates. I'd call them bad carbs, like breads, all those types of things that really spike your blood sugar. Actually, I limit, very limited, and only certain kinds of fruits, because I do think fruit spikes your blood sugar. And I do think that certain carbs and gluten and all of those things can cause serious kind of effects in the body. And I think there are some unique differences in people. There are now some amazing tracking devices on on our blood glucose levels. And I think a lot of people don't really understand that our modern medicine really looks at blood glucose and A1C, but very rarely do they look at how our insulin is in our body and what's spiking insulin and insulin resistance. There's a term that people talk about, metabolic flexibility, and it's ability to go from being very flexible with, not when you're, intermittent fasting. You talk about intermittent fasting, about from burning sugar, carbohydrates, glucose, right, versus burning fat and those things. And I think, our ancestors, they had gone periods without food, and they had to become metabolically flexible. So there's a whole topic and study on metabolic flexibility. But that's where we started getting into, you start hearing a lot about intermittent fasting, going, maybe 16, 18 hours without eating and food, so that the body starts to utilize its own resources. And it's really about having a optimal mitochondrial function. But I do think food is foundational for sure. Also, and a lot of people talk about it, shy away from it, but it's about exercise. It's about moving our body. I think sitting is the new smoking. High intensity training, doing some walking. There is some talk about too much exercise and too much cardio and all those things. And I do think that there is some validity to it. I do think that we do need to start building muscle, especially as we age, which is super important. The other thing too, and here's another pillar, and this is pillar 3, I would say sleep. It's foundational. I think our circadian rhythms play a huge part in our health and well-being. I remember, I was a nurse. I am a nurse. And I remember I used to do those night shifts, and I was like, oh my God. And it affected me in a very, very negative way, I would say. It was hard for me to do that. And I do think our circadian rhythms play such a role, and there's a lot of research coming out about sleep, and how we are more effective with sleep. So that's the other thing. Now, here's another thing that I'm kind of saying is our micronutrients, right? Our vitamins and minerals and all of those things. A lot of people, when they're focusing on weight loss and things like that, they're focusing on macros, which are protein, carbs, fats. And, often, and I believe this, like, our soils are depleted. I don't think we eat enough vegetables. Like, we'd have to eat so much to really get a lot of the requirements. So I do believe highly in supplementation and also green drinks and things like that. And I think a lot of people shy away from the nutrient part because some of it's not regulated, and it's really hard to find some good products that work. I was listening to another podcast about trauma, believe it or not, and mental stress and people that are carrying trauma. And I'm going to talk about this, is about nutrients in our body that help our brain function and help us function more optimally. Also, too, which leads into the next pillar, which is the microbiome. Okay? Our microbiome, our gut health is huge. It's actually, I've heard a lot of people mention that it's its own organism, our own, we have bacteria, right? So when we're on antibiotics, we take antibiotics, we kill off not just bad bacteria in our body, but we kill off the good parts that actually help us in digesting food, providing certain nutrients, all of those things. And there's such a link to our gut and our brain. I've heard some people refer to the gut biome as the second brain. It really is super important. And I think there's a lot more research coming out about certain types of organisms. And I was dumbfounded when I was listening to a podcast where they link gut biome to, obesity and overweight. I'm not sure if it was animal studies or people studies. I don't think they did it on people, where there was obese. They put obese bacteria in animals, and they've gotten fat, the ones that were thin. So there's a lot more research coming out about that, but I just really love that it's so well-rounded. And I'm going to say the final one, I'm going to say mental, emotional as another pillar, right? This was the biggest overlooked part in my overall health and wellness. Not to say I didn't focus on my emotional health. I did. There's talk about, and I love this term, spiritual fitness. There's mental fitness. And you could break this down into certain categories for sure. But one of the things that I really, really liked that I'm hearing is, and this is my own experience. So, growing up, we've had certain traumas in our life. And if we have not learned to excessively or successively navigate our trauma, all of that stress and mental challenge that we may have can lead to affecting the microbiome, how we absorb nutrients, also our anatomy and physiology. I'm a huge believer in this. And I think that was probably the biggest sticking point and shock point for me after I was diagnosed. I was like, oh my God, I'm a healthy guy. I'm at a healthy weight. I eat pretty well. But one of the things was there was a lot of mental stress going on in the background that I didn't really realize. And it actually took me listening to something like I'm sharing with you now, lots of podcasts. I listened to people that were in war, trauma, and all those things. And some of the lessons they learned, I'm like, oh my God, I could totally relate to that. And so one of the podcasts I was listening to, which really was on kind of metabolic flexibility, this person didn't leave out the fact of our mental and emotional and trauma, how we are living our lives. Based on certain traumas in our world, they do cause a certain level of corticosteroid production in our bodies. We have this constant fight or flight. And people that don't have certain extreme traumas, they don't have these constant barrages of all of these, I'm going to say neurochemistry, biochemistry firing in the body. And that's why, we talk about mindfulness. I know I used to be like, oh my God, I can't quiet my mind. And it's a practice. We talk about mindfulness, also certain types of behavioral cognitive therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, whichever way you want to say it, is really, really helpful in looking at unburdening some of these traumas and helping to reduce the overall stress in our lives. And that is super huge. So just to kind of recap, I wanted to keep this short. So food is foundational. Looking at how we eat, what we eat, and very well being consistent. And, I found that when I started to get my diet under control, things started to clear up mentally and emotionally. There was a certain clear there. I cleared up on it. There was stress. Okay, we talk about stress reduction. We talk about exercise. We talked about sleep, micronutrients. How many nutrients we're getting in our body. And I've been I've tried a lot of different things. I've utilized some things, and I'll tell you, when I take, I utilize a kind of a powder green drink that I love, and I've noticed the difference in how it affects me and my body and my mental status. The microbiome, okay, our gut flora, our gut bacteria, and how we're managing that, and also our mental, emotional, and working through the things that have been holding us back. So thanks for joining into this. If you have any questions, you need some feedback or recommendations on things that I've tried, feel free to shoot me a message, Todd Angelucci. You could reach out through the podcast as well on the page, Survival Mode. There's a Facebook page as well. So everyone, have an awesome day.